Hi there. In this video, I want to take you through the post-production process I'm going through for Hero's Victory. After the recording session, I came away with 14 takes from the session, totaling 26.5 minutes of music. We also had 2 videographers on the stage, capturing 60 minutes of behind-the-scenes footage. So the assignment here is to, 1, start on the audio side. Out of those 14 takes, piece together all the best takes of the session to produce one full composite recording that represents the overall best performance of the orchestra. And the next step is to take the video footage and edit that to the 5.5 minute piece of music to come away with a really beautiful music video that incorporates all of the musicians on that day and their performance. So let's take a look at the audio side first. So here we are in GarageBand, and on the left-hand side you can see we have a number of tracks. Each of these tracks represents a take from the day. And if we take a look at the take notes, the first take was a full run through the piece from bar 1 to the end, and the last take was a full run through from bar 1 through the end. And in between, we recorded different sections, bars 1 to 49, 32 to 85, 86 to 43, 143, etc. So now we can see that reflected here in GarageBand. We see that take 111 goes from bar 1 to 49. Take 112 goes from bar 30 to 86, etc. So, and what you can see here is that this yellow line is volume automation. So when the line is up, that means that the volume is at 100%, and when it's down, it's at 0%. So what this is indicating is that from bars 1 to 5, we're not using the audio from this take, and then from 5 to 10, we are using the audio from that take, and then from 10 to 22, we are not using that, right? And you can see in this first part of the piece, it's switching between using material from take 111 to take 121 and then back to 111 again. And then if you look at this whole piece, you can see over the course of the piece, we're utilizing little snippets from different takes to get the best performance. Overall, we're using take 121. That was the best take of the day. That was the final recording that we did at the end of the session, so the musicians had plenty of time to get familiar with the piece. But when we had better material available, we are cross-fading between 121 and those other takes, and it's pretty seamless. So let's just take a listen at a section of this, hearing how it switches. Actually, let's do this section since there's a lot of different switching going on. So you can see it's pretty amazing. You can't really tell. And even I've only done a really rudimentary job here. Ultimately, the mixing engineer is going to do the final polish on this. And I'll just show you some examples of some of the outtakes of why we would choose not to use particular takes. For example, here you can hear the flute cracked a little bit there. Now, that's a really obvious one. For the most part, the reasons why we don't use a take is not that obvious. The orchestra hardly messes up. These are professionals, and usually they're much more subtle things. For example, this one, the tuning of the violas is just a little bit flat. It's really hard to notice, but there is a better take of that. And then here, this is the trumpets, and they do a really good job, but there is a better take where they're just more crisp and precise in their delivery. So here's the outtake. So let's listen to it again. And then let's listen to the one that we ultimately are using in the final. So you can hear it's a little bit crisper and precise. So yeah, so that just gives you a little overview of how we go through this process. And now that we have gone through and identified all the in and out points and which takes should be used at which time, all this information can now be passed over to the mixing engineer. And the mixing engineer has access to all the audio files from every single microphone that was recorded on that day. For this sketch, I'm just using the stereo mix that come from the main mics on the stage, but there are 40 plus microphones that were recording audio on that day. There are spot microphones that were used to record close up to each instrument to get a really precise sound of that instrument. So every section has their own spot mics. And then there's the main mics, which is the Decca tree that sits above the conductor and gives a really balanced field sound for the whole orchestra. And then there are room mics and outriggers that are kind of like more up in the air and recording the space of the room. So what the mixing engineer will do is blend all of these microphones to get the sound that we're going for. And then ultimately, once all that's done, he's got the composite recording taking all these notes, he's mixed it, all the microphones together, and then finally we will master that, and then the audio side of things will be done. Well, while he's doing that, I now have this composite recording, so I can take this into my video software and start the video editing process. So the really unique thing about editing a music video like this is everything has to be synchronized to sound. The first step that I go through in this process is to synchronize camera 1, camera 2, and the recording of the audio in the control room. So we can see here we have camera 1, camera 2, and control room. And then you can see across time we have, so this is our first take, here to here. And we have multiple camera angles for that first take. And we can see these camera angles here. So if I just play this. Right, so we have all of the takes are synchronized between the two cameras. Okay, now what I can do is I can go into the timeline. So this represents the entirety of the session. So I go through this manually and watch it and identify the takes that I like best when I'm listening to it. So if I just, you can see these little dotted lines here represent edit points where I'm like, okay, I actually think we can switch to this camera angle here. A lot of the times that, well, not a lot of the times, but some of the times that happens, you can see that camera 2 was on the trombones down here, and then camera 2 is going to move to focus on something else. So all of this footage is unusable while the camera is moving. So while it's doing that, I switch to use the cellos. And we continue to go through all this footage and switch back and forth between camera 1 and camera 2 so that I have kind of a full picture of all the best footage. Now, once I have that, I can go to the next step. And this is the next step. So what we were just looking at before was all of the footage lined up horizontally from start to finish of the session. And now what I'm doing is I'm taking each take of that long session and I'm putting them vertically on top of each other in the right place. So here we can see this is take 121. That's the full take of the full recording of the whole piece. And then on top of this, we can see the different takes. So these 3 takes were bars 1 through 49. This take was bar 112. 112 and 113, bars 32 to 85, and then these other ones. So they're all placed now in position, synchronizing with the audio of the piece, of that composite recording that I created in GarageBand. So now that I have it in this form, I can start playing it and getting a general idea of turning different takes off and on in the camera angles. Because now you can see if we've got 1, 2, 3, 4 takes stacked on top of each other with 2 camera angles per take, that means we have 8 different camera angles that we can choose from for bars 1 through 49. So for every section of the piece, it's basically going through all of the available camera angles and making decisions on what's going to be the best thing to present to go along with the character of the music, to highlight the performance of the musicians and stuff like this. So that's where the bulk of the work is. But this is basically a great starting point and puts everything in the right position. And then we go on to basically the final editing of the music video. So this is what it looks like now that I've completed all the editing. And basically for this 5.5 minute piece of music, there are over 100 different decision points, 100 different cuts to switch between different camera angles to produce the final video. So if we just zoom in on a section here, let's just choose this section. So let's just watch this piece right now so you can just see how this looks. So that's pretty much it. But yeah, it's definitely a lot of precision detail work. But to me it's really fun, especially once I get to this part where I get to like craft the pace of the piece. Because to me it's also like the length of time I'm doing cuts like that. Like if it's a slow section, I might have longer cuts that help it to breathe more, and when it's a fast-paced section I might have shorter cuts to kind of like contribute to the energy of the piece. So to me this process is also part of the performance, and it's really a fun process. And I'll share a couple Easter eggs with you. A lot of the time the first pass that I do this to the final edit is just what I would say is clean. And I take a lot of, like what I just showed you, just the takes that were naturally falling at different parts of the piece and find the best camera angles from those takes. But sometimes there are times where I'm like, oh, I wish they had gotten a shot of the brass at this section, but actually in the session at that time, even with 8 different angles, they didn't capture the brass. So what do I do with that situation? Well, sometimes what you can do is you can take brass from another part of the piece and move it to a different part, and you can kind of like fudge the timing a little bit so it looks like, unless you're really paying attention very closely, like it looks like it belongs in that section. So I've done that a couple of times when I wish that there were certain things. And another interesting one is like my videographer team didn't capture the timpani player at all during my session. There were other composers that were recorded on the day of the session, and there was a fellow composer's piece who I know had a similar like timpani role in their piece. So what I did was I took the timpani footage from their session and I brought it into mine. It happens here. And the timpani roll is pretty much exact, but the difference is when the hit happens. So, hopefully you don't notice this when you're just watching it, but what I had to do is a morph cut between, in order to get the timing of the hit on the timpani correct, I had to cut a little bit of the roll off, move the beat of the hit to match my audio, and then do a morph cut, which kind of cross dissolves between one clip to the other. So there's stuff like that happened. That's like the final polish, like little things like that where there can be tricks done. But for the most part, I try to stick with the timing of the natural performance because, one, that's easiest, and two, the videography team did a great job. So there weren't many cases when I had to do little tricks like that. But yeah, I'm really happy with how it's come out, and I'm really excited to share it with you when it's all done.